listening to Who's Tom and Dick, a weekly podcast with your hosts, Martin Weavers, fighting stage 4 lung cancer, and Patrick Mortimer, living with heart disease. Why not grab yourself a cup of coffee, sit back, and enjoy the chatter as we discuss and share information, talking about tough subjects, and offering help, support, and motivation with a positive mental attitude.
Good morning and welcome to Who's Tom and Dick. Good morning, Martin. How are you today?
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and good morning to you, Patrick. How are you?
I'm not too bad. And how's your conjunctivitis?
I'm still waiting for a phone call from the doctor.
Blimey, that's over a week now.
I know.
Don't time fly.
Yeah, no.
Anyway, we've got another guest this morning, haven't we?
We have. We certainly
Sorry,
have.
I cut you to the quick there.
You
We're
did.
going to say something.
I was just going to say it'll get better.
Yeah.
It's all just boring, something like that. But
Right, okay.
Yeah, so today we're talking with a special guest about the language of loss, whether it's from bereavement, divorce, or from a job or anything similar. And our special guest is here to talk about it. So will you please welcome to Who's Tom and Dick, Debbie Briden.
Good morning, Debbie.
That's a big build-up.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. We're fresh after the bank holiday weekend.
Oh, yes. You're all ready to tell us all about it? You've got a new book.
I certainly have,
Coming out,
yes. I have, yes.
I don't think you mind me mentioning you're now retired early.
I did, early retirement, yes.
I could see that. And you just want to tell us all about how you come about writing the book.
Mm-hmm.
And all the loss and the sudden loss of no work, wasn't it?
Indeedy. Yeah, so kind of, and I don't want this to be doom and gloom. It is about bereavement and grief and loss and so on, and and it's not all doom and gloom. So for me, I've always been interested in behaviours. I've been managing teams and people for 25 years, and I learned early on that as a manager, you treat people differently depending on who they are and their reactions and their personality and so on. So I've always been fascinated by behaviours, and I've been quite fortunate enough and been quite successful in my career. I set up a savings division within a private bank about 13 and a half years ago and took on numerous amounts of people. Part of that process and account opening was closure through death, through bereavement for our customers. It became very evident early on that we didn't do it right just because that customer is now deceased doesn't mean they're no longer a customer as such, and people were treated poorly, family members. I don't know if anyone has experienced it themselves, and I certainly have with the loss of my mum and my stepdad, that typically a person that's dealing with estate deals with 21 different phone calls in that, and it can take anything from 24 hours up to weeks and weeks to get resolution. It's just horrific circumstances and the way people are treated just because they consider, well, you're no longer a customer, so it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. They're not going anywhere, so what if it takes X amount of time? Mm. Now, I had part of what we did was dealing with bereavements, but I also, around about the time we started to get death certificates and so on in, I saw a column within, I think it was the Times, and it was about a lady and mum went to their local branch, HSBC branch, every week. Mum was an aged lady, and every week they knew everybody by name. They knew mum and daughter by name and so on. And it went on for, years. She was taking a mum to the branch. Well, unfortunately, mum died, and the lady went in with the death certificate and, knew everybody. Oh, where's mum? Where's mum? Unfortunately, she died. That's what I'm here for, register a death. Oh, you can't do that here. You've got to do that over the phone. We've got a bereavement department. Well, she walked out without taking a phone number or anything, and she hunted high and low to try and find this number. Eventually, she got it, and there was no apology or anything like that. So, well, you need to go in the branch and do it. So she said, well, I've been to the branch, and they've told you the wrong information. She went back to the branch, and the branch said, no, you have to do it online. So she said, look, I'm not being messed around anymore. You need to do this for me. They could do it, and they did it. So, why stop? But the thing that happened afterwards, she went round to her mum's property, and there was a letter from HSBC and she opened it up and said, dear Mrs. X, thank you for making us aware of your circumstances have changed, addressed to the deceased person personally, and so she changed her address or something, it was horrific. So I read that and thought, could we be guilty as a bank, of something similar? So that's where I introduced all new processes, did lots of reviews and research on what other people and other banks and customer services were providing. So I made some significant changes. However, a lot of things were based on risk. So the information we needed, documents we needed and so on. We were a relatively small new bank and the risk appetite wasn't there, so we were quite strict and of what our requirements were. We probably didn't ask for a lot more than the bigger banks would ask for because, like I say, the risk. And then about 4 or so years ago, I was asked as part of some changes with the FCA. I know it's all very boring and very technical, but as the changes, it's all about consumer duty and how retail customers need to be treated, that they need to be the priority. An element of that included deceased customers as well. So I was sponsored by the CEO to set up a bank-wide bereavement team. And it started with me spending 6 months researching how other banks and building societies, customer service providers treated their bereaved families. And it was shocking.
Yeah.
And I did things like, I did a scorecard. So how easy was it for me to find the information? And what gobsmacked me as well is these big banks and service providers have a list there, in the event of a death, arrange a funeral. Well, I don't really need to go to my bank or, a Vodafone or somebody like that to tell me I need to, bury my husband as such, And also the amount of time it took me to actually, just putting in bereavement or death as a bereaved family member, what would I type in a search function, that? And it was so difficult to actually find the information. Mm-hmm. So, for me, I was aware of that and I made loads of notes to make sure that whatever, the keyword somebody would put in, it was, easy to find as such. So 6 months of research. And then what I did is I recruited a brand new team of people that all had life experiences. So whether they'd been through bereavement themselves, lost themselves, even mental health issues, personally and so on. So people that had life experiences, that was important for me because they would be able to relate to that family member.
Yeah.
And I also changed the policy as well. We were a bigger bank and it was all about, again, taking more risks. So reduced the requirements, documents requirements and so on up to a certain amount of money in a bank account. Average customer would say 69. So as you could imagine, death certificates were quite regular. Mm-hmm. And also, the average balance of an account was kind of on par with about 50,000. So that's where we set our limit. So going from end-to-end process of 6 to 8 weeks, it was, if you provided me with all those documentations that we needed by 2:00 that same day that you've told me, I'll give you the money by 4:30. Simple as that, and it's simplified. But on the back of that, what we found is by the team being relatable to the family members, we were able to have really quite complex discussions, and conversations. How are you? How is, have you got the support you need? Do you need anything more for us? Can we help you with anything? Do you need me to do some search on the internet and so on? Let's talk about the bereaved, your husband, your dad, your sister, your child. Let's talk about them, and it was incredible, the response we get back. At that moment in time, it's about the bereaved person, not so much about the deceased. It's about me, I'm the one suffering. I'm the one going through this. I need to talk about it. Probably 85 to 90% of the people want to have that conversation, want to talk about their loved one, want to, and it's all about, the words you can say, the words you can't say. Typically, we're like, oh, you'll get over it, you'll move on, stiff upper lip type of attitude. Well, I don't want to forget. I will never forget. I might be able to live with it a bit easier, but I don't want to forget that person. I don't want to move on. This is the situation I'm in at this moment in time. And about behaviours where people go through denial, they go through anger, they go through, every emotion you can imagine, like a change curve. They're up and down, up and down. Their senses are heightened. Like noise becomes just us having a conversation. A bereaved person couldn't bear the noise. It's too loud for them. But that bereaved person don't realise that it is what grief is doing to them. And also, it's about how people are grieving as well. When I lost my mum, there's 4 of us children, we all dealt with it so different. I went straight into process mode and delayed my grief, whereas my siblings, all of us, so different of how we handled it. And that's right. there's no rule book in how you should grieve. There's no rule book and, you will go through this stage, you will go through that stage. Like I say, my grief was delayed because I was dealing with all the estate. So in a rule book,
Your mind was occupied, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Indeed. And you must have had an element of that experience yourself when you were diagnosed, of the fear, the anger, why me? I'm young, I've got all this, and so you are grieving what should be and what, the potential outcome as well, your future and so on. So
I'd never thought of it as grief though.
No. But you went through those emotions, didn't you? You went through those, the denial, the anger, thinking about your future or no future, thinking about your loved ones, what you're leaving behind, all of that. That's grief. That's, that's just not bereavement grief. That is just grief as a whole.
I'd never thought of it as that.
No.
I just thought it's just the way I've gone through my, didn't even think it was an emotion really.
No, you don't.
It's weird, really. But
you going through it, with your diagnosis and so on, and then your nearest and dearest, like your wife, she didn't want it to be about her because it's about you. So what she's doing is she's kind of got her grief in a box. As I said, everybody reacts differently. Everybody deals with it differently, and you don't need to be told how to deal with it. You don't need to be told that you'll take you should be over it by now. It's you at your pace.
Yeah.
At your however you want to deal with it is right. And it's about reassuring people that whatever they demonstrate, however long it takes as well, it is right. And it's and it shouldn't be dismissed and it shouldn't be ignored.
My father-in-law was like that. He wouldn't show any emotion whatsoever when his wife passed away, and we never knew him to cry. And he bottled it up. And what happened? He had a stroke.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that made him have the stroke, but it always makes us wonder.
Yeah.
But yes, but like you said, everybody deals with it in a different way. There is no right way.
No.
But and there is no time.
No, absolutely not. It should be at your pace, and like I say, it's however you deal with it is right, and shouldn't be questioned by anybody. So I spent 2.5 years on the bereavement team. Great success. We had an incredible amount of feedback. Even little things that I used to do, such as care calls. So I used to say to the team, if somebody's really impacted you, because not everybody dies through old age, there were some horrific circumstances, really horrific circumstances that we dealt with. And making a care call to that individual, they were so grateful. And they were like, you were just the account holder's bank, and they're so shocked by it. Sending out little packets of forget-me-not seeds. I can't tell you what that did for individuals, like 50p packet of seeds were just like, wow, and we had some feedback a year later. A lady wrote to us and said they've grown, the plants have grown. And every time, she said, the weird thing is, every time I walk out of my house and I see these forget-me-not plants, I think of you, which is incredible. Who are we? We're just a service provider in a bank, but that's how special it can be by having those nice conversations and that, which kind of like leads me on to what can you say? What can't you say? And I said earlier that 85-90% of the people actually want to talk about the deceased and, what they're going through, because at that moment in time, they are going through it. They want to have those conversations. They want to keep that person alive as such, and that. So they want to have those conversations. And so people don't want to hear, in time, you'll get over it. And at least they didn't suffer any longer. And, people don't want to hear that. They want to have the conversations. And it's very typical that you're ghosted almost. That's the new word at the moment, isn't it? Ghosted. When somebody has lost somebody, you choose to walk away from them or, not to have a conversation because you don't know what to say. But people would rather you say, I don't know what to say to you, rather than just being ignored.
Time is a great healer, people often say, don't they?
But how do you know? You don't know. You're not in that person's body, so you don't know how they're feeling and how long it is. You see? That's right. So I always knew that I was going to have to hand over the bereavement department to the business as such, back to the bank. So it was a kind of mutual decision that I'm going to take early retirement now. I went out on a bang, on a high, and So I retired end of October last year, but prior to retiring, so I knew for 3 months I was going to retire.
Yeah.
And I thought, what the hell am I going to do with my days? What the hell am I going to do all day? And my daughter sent me a link, and it was about self-publishing book and how to do it, through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
It's always been a lifelong dream of mine to write a book, but I never knew what subject. It's like at first I was going to write a fictional book, and I looked into it and I thought, that looks fairly easy. And so I thought to myself, I really think bereavement and loss is a real great topic because it's a taboo subject, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's things people don't like to talk because it's sad. People don't want to talk about it.
If there was a list of things to talk about, that would probably be right near the bottom sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah, indeed. So, and again, for all my experiences, through managing people, like I said, the grief people experience because of their own loss, divorce, their job, finances, friendship, relationships, all of that kind of thing, and bereavement, grief, very much the same. So I thought, well, what I could do is write a book about what I really know and what I'm passionate about, which is grief, as sad as it is. Yeah,
I bet you're fun at parties. I'm only joking.
No, absolutely. But, and I'm so passionate about it. And it's more so about the behaviours more than anything.
You can hear the passion in your voice as you're talking.
It's something
great.
I
think it's great.
Yeah. And so I started drafting it, and I had somebody create the front cover of it, and I self-published it, and it went live in the beginning of April.
How long did it take you to write?
6 months. And I think because
you already had it up here,
I did
you?
have, absolutely, yeah. So it was already there. I've touched on an element of grief in the workplace as well. The way people are handled or dealt with when there is a bereavement or a loss within the workplace is awful. And for me, and I've experienced myself being part of a team going to HR, that if it's a blood relations that has died, a close one like your mum, your sister, your husband or wife, you got a day off or 3 days compassionate leave. If it's further down the line or non-blood related, you have to take it as holiday.
I know, because a lot of people now live with their grandparents.
Yes.
And they don't get that time, do they?
No, you don't. And again, it's like, you should be over it by now. You've had that time off, back into work, but it's not like that, So there's a bit in there I've touched, and I've actually drafted a second book. It's called Taking Grief to Work.
Oh, okay.
And it's it's 3 different perspectives. So as a manager, how should I treat somebody coming back through bereavement or loss? And what steps should I do? Phased return, celebrating that person each year, making it sort of not like shrine, but certainly make it not kind of brushing under the carpet, having those, again, conversations. How do you want us to treat you? You tell us, you're in control of this. Also, as a perspective, as a bereaved person, it's almost like a walk of shame when you walk back into even after a holiday, when you've had a couple of weeks of holiday and you walk into an office space and that, it's awful. What people, have they been taught? Well, it's dreadful.
Yeah.
What have they missed? Oh my gosh, nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Or if you've been off sick for a long time, it's an awful experience to go back into the office in front of people. Everyone's been talking about you. So as a bereaved person, what should I expect when I go back into that office environment? How should my manager treat me, and so on? And also, as a colleague, how should I treat a member of the team that's coming back after long-term sick or through bereavement? So I've done it from just 3 different perspectives.
Oh, okay.
So,
because some places that I know of, they don't even do a back-to-work interview.
Are you okay? Just touch on, what can I do for you? Are you happy? Do we need to do phased return? And it's not about trying to catch anyone out. And this is, and the sad thing is, the employees that are going back into work do think that the managers are trying to catch them out, and also a lot of the managers are trying to catch people out as well. And it's not about that. It's about, a bit of TLC, bit of care, bit of recognition for what they've experienced and what they've gone through, because that increases morale, motivation, and giving people all the support there. And also, dare I say it, productivity. If you support somebody and give them, and you compromise with them and you give them what they need, then you are going to get paid back, 10 times over.
Definitely. We're talking about leaving work, and the effect that has on people. I read an article about the footballer Paul Gascoigne, and we all know how good Paul Gascoigne was. He played for England, etc., etc. But once he finished football and he didn't have to go in training anymore, there was a void in his life. I mean, we all famously know he hit the bottle. But is this a similar kind of thing that you was talking about?
Yes.
That he had at the end of his football career, or any footballer. It doesn't have to be just Paul Gascoigne. There's lots of them come to an end. I mean, some go into management, which is a little bit different. But so, yeah, that's a similar.
Absolutely, yeah, grief. And I even
that
experienced
is grief, is it?
It's grief, yes, because you're grieving for what you had. It's no longer there. And I had exactly the same feeling. So, yes, it was my decision to leave work, but I was fairly important, had, regular meetings and conversations with people to nothing. And like, what am I going to do? Why are people not contacting me anymore? It was an awful, I was very low for, although it was my decision, very low. And thankfully the book and so on has kept me quite busy now. And I really enjoyed doing what I'm doing, made sure, keep the TV off and so on. But yeah, I went through an element of grief and I was very snappy and, angry as well, although it was my decision. But he would have felt exactly the same because he was, as we all know, everybody of our age as such knows Paul Gascoigne, don't they, And he was very good at his game. He was very, always in the papers as that personality. And I've seen some programs about him afterwards as well, where, he's living in a hotel, he's a loner because he almost like bought friendships. And then football career ended. Do people want to know, and it's a difficult pill to swallow. Suddenly I'm so important in that. And then suddenly nobody wants to know me.
So for your book, what kind of research did you do? Did you, like you just said, you saw something about him. Did you get on YouTube or anything like that?
No, nothing on YouTube. So most of it all from my experiences I've had through my working career and experience and, fundamental loss of my own as well. So those experiences. There was a couple of books, quite a few books I read, which were the similar kind of wavelength that what I was on. But I think I made my book more relatable for so many different experiences, whereas typically you get a book about grief through bereavement, but mine obviously touched on loss as a whole, not just death. So most of it was my own experiences and witnessing behaviours firsthand.
You hear a lot of men particularly who work all their lives in perhaps a routine, suddenly retire and within 2 or 3 years they're dead. A great example was my father-in-law. He was a publican and he was a landlord and he was well respected. They were the Licensed Fixtures Association and all that kind of thing, really. And he felt like he was somebody because, people wanted to come into his pub and, and it was very powerful as a landlord back in those days, He retired. Early 60s, to sit in his garden, read a book here and there, and unfortunately he passed away at 69. And again, a lot of that was alcohol because, his social life and his life was around that pub and all the people that were coming into it. It's got none of it. No one was coming to see him. It
was his way of life, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, you get into a routine over 40 or 50 years, don't you? And then suddenly,
bang. Nothing,
it's gone.
Yeah. It is.
And a lot of people can't cope with it.
No.
And men mainly, I think, because they don't get out and communicate like women do.
No, I know. Again, this British stiff upper lip type, attitude and that, which is sad. But and I don't think there's no preparation at all for retiring or
No.
At all, is there really?
No.
Like you, I don't know, typically 65, 67, you retire and then, what do I do? But there's no support, there's no help groups, there's nothing to prepare you for that. What are you going to fill your days with?
Yeah. So you've now been retired since last October, so nearly 6 months. 6 months. You obviously created this little baby back in your bank. Do you still keep in touch with people about it, or do they actually contact you about it?
Yes.
Or have you just let it go completely?
No, quite funny enough, I'm seeing a lot of most of the team on Saturday. We're out in London, and so I still keep in regular contact with them. They contact me. I shared my book with an ex-colleague who shared it on LinkedIn, and then an ex-director of mine contacted me and said, this is great, and I really, want to sort of share it with lots of people and so on, which is fantastic. So yes, I keep in regular contact with people, and also some of the reviews I've had from my book, because I'm not really...
Some of them are fantastic.
Amazing,
I read
aren't
them.
they?
Yeah.
And again, I don't recognise the names or anything. I've had reviews from Australia, I've had reviews from Canada and America as well, which is, fantastic. So, and I think the book really just gives reassurance to people, that they're not on their own. There is, support there, and there is the right way of doing things, for the support as such. And like I said, I keep emphasising, it's at your pace and your behaviour is your behaviour, and it's right, and it's...
Well, I think you've hit on a subject that, as I said, not many people talk about.
No.
And it's a good thing that people should talk about it. As I said, with my father-in-law, that was the prime example. Now, you've mentioned your book, but you haven't told us the title.
No, it's called The Language...
You're keeping that secret.
I am. It's called The Language of Loss, and people just search my name, Debbie Briden, on Amazon. I'm the only Debbie Briden on there, thankfully.
It's Debbie.
Debbie.
I.E.?
I.E., yeah.
Yeah.
Did you speak to any grief counsellors in your time?
I have, yes, many. So Cruise was, that's kind of where I got the passion from, I think, was Cruise. We did some training, internal training, and I offered it out to everybody in the bank as well. Bearing in mind there was 1,500 employees, because for me, it wasn't just about the business with loss. It was about how you as an individual could take away from it, and it was, again, an exceptional course that taught us grief is not just about death. It's about loss. Anything that's fundamental to you is grief, basically, And I never forget, there was some years ago, I worked with a colleague who she'd lost her... It was just like a bit like this, a wallet type purse, and it was made of like silk with a little button on it, and she'd lost it, and she was... I thought, Christ, it's only a purse, and she was absolutely hysterical. Oh my God, got to find it. It turned out that it was her nan, again, who she'd lived with. Her nan had made it for her when she was a child, and her nan had passed away. That meant so much to her. That's the only sentimental thing that she had, and she'd lost it, and she was devastated through it. And we were all like, for Christ's sake, it's only a purse. We couldn't understand the behaviour. It's just,
Now you've written the book, and now you've obviously researched everything that you did. Do you understand other people's feelings even more now?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I can
remember
read them, or... Yeah. And I can remember when my mum lost her husband, and I could see the curve area that she was in. It's like we were sitting in a restaurant with my sister and myself and her, and it was kind of an empty restaurant as such, and it was like the noise levels were quite high anyway, and we just said something and my sister laughed, and she was like, stop, like, oh, it's so loud, and we're like, Mum, what's going on? And I was like, she's in that grief curve, where everything that senses are heightened and so on. She was angry, and, so I experience and witness it now. And also, it's not just about death, but there's certain conversations I have with friends, with family, with, ex-colleagues and so on, that I react very differently. Not how they would expect to, but very differently, because I've had that kind of experience and with some external training as well. So, it's very different. And again, I'm comfortable having very difficult conversations with people.
Right.
But it's not, it's the way you talk and it's the way you say it and so on. So very comfortable with, like, I again remember having a conversation with a bereaved family member whose wife died in Spain. Again, it was like, was it expected? Had she been ill for a long time? Probably people wouldn't even ask that question, And from there, he was so open, and the conversation went on for a good hour, about, and then we were laughing and smiling about the life they had together, and just by just asking
he opened up then, didn't he?
Totally, yeah. You know, asking that one question, had she been ill for a long time?
So what was the name of your book again, please, Debbie?
The Language of Loss.
The Language of Loss, and you can get it on Amazon. Any other place? Just Amazon at the moment?
Just Amazon at the moment, yes. And I've set up also on Instagram, not as me as Through the Language of Loss, and TikTok, where I just share every day just little quotes, like words that people can't find themselves.
Yeah.
What's that called?
That's, again, Language of Loss.
All right.
Fantastic.
And then my future plan is to do YouTube channel. Just really talking, a bit like we've done today, but sort of breaking things down a little bit, really. Just somewhere so people have got it's kind of like a safe area for them, because, you know, it's very personal to people, and it just, and as we find and we've found out, and I've experienced as well, nearest and dearest won't divulge everything about how they're feeling because they don't want to burden you.
Yeah.
You see, so, you know, if I can help somebody just by talking and they listen, you know, they're not feeling, you know, they're not going to burden me with anything, you know, and so it's just, for me, it's just a safe place for people to be reassured.
We've not had many people on who've written books, have we?
No, we haven't. We've had one that has written a book but not published it.
Oh, yeah. Me.
That'll be you, yeah.
Me.
It's so easy, Martin. So easy to do.
Yeah. Undertakers are another interesting point of view, because, you know, very often somebody will die at home and the body's left in the chair where they died, and the undertakers come along and take their body away. And I've had that experience, obviously, when my dad died. You know,
and me too.
And I don't think all of them have training.
No.
Because it's they appear as if it's just a job, and it is to them.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you've got to be fairly
understanding.
It's because their client is the deceased person.
Yeah.
That's who they see. And one of the ladies who I recruited to work on the bereavement team, she worked for a funeral home. And I said to her, I thought you'd be ideal. What kind of training did you have? She said, nothing. And I said, so when families and all that, she said, there's no training. This is all off your own back, you know, and that's just...
Yeah, it's a whole long episode of events. There's the death, then there's, if it happens at home, collection of the body, the undertakers, the vicar coming round and asking what you want him to say at the service,
post-mortem,
and there's so many things going on that's just bringing it back and back and back again.
And then you might have to wait weeks for the funeral to go ahead. So you know, you are living with the death, the emotion. And then you go back again to steps, don't you? You know, and you just keep going back, and then, you know, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back as such through it all. And it's just such a long process.
You mentioned about having to do this, that when people die and all the... But when I was with Behaviours District Council for my mum, which is the one for Suffolk, they do everything for you now.
Wow.
You'll go there and you'll say, you know, mum's passed away, blah, blah, blah. And they will do everything, all the departments that you need to do, rather than you go to those departments. Behaviours District Council do it all for you now. It was really, because that is the time when you don't want to have to go to all those departments, because you go through it once, then you go through it again, and the stress of all that. But they were fantastic. I can't thank them enough.
You mentioned about a bank, and you sort of shutting the timeline down from notifying the bank that the deceased person is deceased and the account money is frozen, shorten it down to sort of a day. What documents did you have to ask for to make that happen? So death certificate being the main one. Death certificate, yes. And now there's so much you can get online as well, which helps, you know. So I made sure we had access to everything, you know, we could possibly have. So a death certificate, and I'd accept everything via email. So there was a form you filled in, the executor filled in, with their details in, because I did electronic check on that individual to make sure that they are who they say they are, because our relationship was with the deceased, and it was important that we ensured that because they entrusted their life savings with us, we wanted to make sure we were giving it to the money to the person that was entitled to it. Okay, that was the most important thing for us. So a death certificate, the details of who the executor is. If it's under 50,000, a copy of the will, because again, that would lay out the
the wishes of the deceased, and a bank account where the money's going to, because I could do an electronic verification on that bank account. If they provided all that information, then we'd close the account, they could have that money that same day.
Right. I'm not saying it wasn't difficult years ago, but I mean, nowadays people have got mobile phones, internet banking, passwords. Mm-hmm. They're everywhere, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
And, when somebody dies, you've just shutting off a mobile phone contract is a nightmare for somebody who's dead.
Yeah, yeah. All of it, I know. And it shouldn't be. And again, and I think because I was so in touch with the data protection or GDPR rules and so on, the regulations there, it only applies to living beings. It doesn't apply to anybody's deceased. So I was able to use that to our advantage, really. So in order for me to be able to send stuff out by email, the account detail by email of that individual, which really did help.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, even now, when I've looked, I still do a bit of research, and there's a lot of banks, builder societies, and customers, like you say, of mobile phone providers that ask for. I
was going to ask that, funny enough.
Yeah.
If other banks have copied what you've sort of set up and things like that. And...
No, but I know that there's a big focus on changes because of the consumer duty that was the regulation that was put forward from FCA. So there's a big focus on that, and a lot of businesses are being audited by FCA because of consumer duty. So it's all good. It is good news.
Well, that's very interesting.
Another eye-opening session.
I know. We learn so much from people we get in.
I'm sure you do.
In our interview, things we've never even known before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, your enthusiasm comes over in abundance.
Oh, I appreciate that.
It
Thank
really
you.
does.
Yeah.
We can tell, can't we?
Yeah.
But you certainly know your subject.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us today, Debbie. Much appreciated.
The Language of Loss.
The Language of Loss.
Yes, by Debbie Briden.
Right. Available on all good book providers and Amazon. Yeah, brilliant.
Thanks very much, Debbie, for coming on.
I appreciate the invite.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Much appreciated. And we'll hopefully have another one next week, won't we?
Yeah.
Look at who we've got lined up next week. We've got Beauty next week. That'll be handy for you.
I wonder when you're going to come in with Beauty and the Beast.
You can learn a lot from that one.
Thanks very much, mate. That's time to say goodbye.
Oh, all right then. Goodbye.
See you next week.
See ya. Might see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Who's Tom and Dick podcast with your hosts, Martin Weavers and Patrick Mortimer. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform. New episodes are available every Friday. Thanks for tuning in.